Greetings and welcome to this week's episode of UC Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto, and I've got Kevin Kieller with me. Kevin, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everybody, and hello,
Every,
David.
everybody's seen Kevin on my show multiple times. Kevin, we had one heck of a week last week, didn't we? You flew into New York, and we were doing Collaboration Week New York. And this week's show, rather than me walking around with my phone and taking little pictures of what the floor looks like and the show looks like, I figured we could just talk through it and run some clips and go over what everybody. It was really an interesting week. We had, all in about 150 to 200 people from the New York area registered for the 5 different venues, and I think everybody got a lot out of it. I didn't hear anything negative. Did you?
Oh, no, it was great for me being in the Big Apple, talking about collaboration, going to all different venues. I thought it was very different than, your typical conference where you're kind of in the same place. This was even every half day, you were at a different place, which I thought was super interesting. Great content, great, presenters and great side conversations as well.
Yeah, so we have for anybody who's interested who did or didn't attend, it doesn't really matter, I guess. If you go to collaborationweekny.org, and I guess I'll put that up here one more time on the screen, the you'll see all the please register, come, here's our speaker stuff. But on the last page, which says presentations and photos, I have updated that. So now you have photos of each one of the venues and the presentations just as they were presented up there as PDF. So if you're interested, feel free to take a look. It's going to be there. The first session, and let's kind of walk through them all because I was at all of them. You were at most of them. The first session took place at Cisco's offices at Penn One. The folks that run, I think it's Gulf and Western, but I'm not 100% sure about that. The folks that run that facility, which used to be called One Penn Plaza, did a whole rebuild that they're still in the middle of rebuilding the front of the Madison Square Garden area. And the big changes, they changed it from One Penn to Penn One. So we were all up at Penn One in Cisco's offices, and I opened up the event, and Gary Sorrentino was my special guest. He spoke. He's the global CIO of Zoom, and then we had a panel discussion up there that included I want to get the names right: Sharath Abraham of Jabra, and Kevin Hyatt of Disney, and Eric Jones of WeDot, who we were all going to be talking about hybrid. The return to work, the return to office, whether we're working remotely, whether we're dealing with this flexible working. And it turned out to be pretty much a half-day conversation about trust in the workplace. That we all kind of, at least the collaboration professionals, we all kind of got past this idea of returning to office versus hybrid versus flexible. The answer is one size doesn't fit all, and it is what it is, and you can't stroke everybody with the same brush. It's got to be what the organization needs and what it doesn't need. But we were all talking about how terrible it was that firms that are, making profits in the billions are firing 10, 20, $30,000 people at a swath just because they feel like it, because their stock goes up. We were talking about how crazy it is to have to jiggle your mouse after 5 minutes in order to get the screensaver to not come on when you're sitting at home and no one can see your screen anyway. Or that, when they've got ping pong tables in the office for break, but they want you to badge into the ping pong room, so they want to know when you're being lazy. The whole area, Gary Sorrentino's great quote, and I'll try and play it. I know the audio is bad, but was this idea is if you would never hire somebody that you didn't trust, if you would go 3, 4, 5, 6 levels of interviews with somebody and only make them an offer when you really trust them, how come as soon as they start working, you don't trust them anymore?
But one thing you said back there was trust. I asked this question once. I said, would you hire an employee that you don't trust? They said, never. And why, when they become an employee, do you not trust them? Yeah. And that's what we're seeing by putting the card reader outside the ping pong.
And generationally, there's a shift going on in the workplace right now. We're again, us gray-haired old guys, we expected to work for an organization for 10, 20, 30 years and have reciprocal. And that reciprocal is gone. You had companies like one of the ones that you mentioned talk about how they wanted all their employees to come back to the office because company culture is the most important thing to them, and then they fired 20,000 employees with an email at midnight, busting their own culture because it's only important to them when it's important to them. I think that trust with large employers is gone.
What's happened? How have we eroded this situation with large organizations and middle managers to get to where we are today? And it was a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, no, and I watched. I wasn't at that one because
You were flying in at the time.
Yeah, I was flying in at the time, but I watched the clips that I know you had posted on LinkedIn, and I thought, Gary's comment around trust I really thought that that was insightful. And I think, initially organizations tried to say, we need people to come back to the office to improve productivity. And then I think that didn't go anywhere because, for knowledge workers, like they don't really measure productivity. Like, I often, when people say that, I'm like, well, what's your productivity today? Is it, and of course, for most people, there isn't a measure of that. Um, and then I think they pivoted and they talked about we need people to come into the office to improve innovation or collaboration. And that's a little more vague, but I think, Gary nailed it because it is a trust thing. It's that, if they say, hey, if I don't see you, I don't think you're working, which is a sad state of affairs. Um, but that seems to be, kind of where we are. And then that's created this reciprocated non-trust from the employees, right? Because if the organizations aren't acting trustworthy, I think that they've lost the trust of the employees, and that unfortunately becomes this negative spiral. So,
Yeah. And honestly, I don't see a way out of it. And there's a great comment that was posted last week, and I copied it last week from the CEO of NVIDIA. Which what is there? Are they now the $2 trillion cap company? I was reading the numbers are just off the charts, and
oh
their
yeah,
CEO has said, "I trust my people. I don't care where they work. Why are we even talking about this?" So
right.
there isn't a direct correlation or relevance between where you work and how successful your organization is. And in fact, I would postulate from my perspective, there is a direct correlation between allowing autonomy and flexibility to knowledge workers, clearly not frontline workers, but a knowledge worker and productivity and profitability and success. But we're still mired in this thing, and large organizations don't realize how much harder their job is going to be to recruit people going forward. While, obviously there are a lot of tech people on the street right now looking for work, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years from now, as Gen Z moves further into the workforce, when they get an offer from a company and they ask that company, well, what is my guarantee that you're not going to let me go on a whim in 3 weeks from
Right.
now or 3 months from now? I don't think they're going to have an answer. I think that trust is broken, and companies are going to need to start rebuilding that. It is kind of a sad situation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Two real quick comments because I know we got them the other sections. I know that Microsoft on their work trend index, they started talking about employees thriving versus just being engaged. And I think that one of the things from a thriving perspective is having that trust. And then there was a comment, I think, to the last week from what you posted from the Gary clip, and somebody was saying, and I think it was Robin from Metrigy saying, well, organizations are trying to, I don't know, like honor their real estate investments. But I'm like, the investment is a sunk investment. This is like business 20. It's like a sunk cost. So if the way you're trying to leverage your investment is to disenfranchise your employees, now you got two bad things. Like they're unrelated. Yeah. Like you got to solve the real estate investment thing, but forcing people back to the office that don't need to or don't want to come back to the office, that does nothing for your real estate investment, and it definitely craters your employee engagement, right? So,
Yeah,
don't do that. Yeah.
I had, I have a great track record. If anybody looks at my articles, I have a great article on LinkedIn called Crystal Balls. But anyway, I have a great track record of predictions in our industry going back 15 or 20 years. And I predicted we'd stop talking about this by the end of this year, by the end of 2024, we'd hit some sort of equilibrium and we'd not be talking about this return to the office versus flexible versus whatever. I'm not sure now. I think, we're built, it's digging itself in deeper. So we'll have to kind of revisit it after Enterprise Connect and Infocom and see what other people think. But it was definitely interesting. And then the next session took place at Planar. Thank you, Planar. Thank you, Cisco, for hosting us in the morning. Thank you, Planar, for hosting us the first day in the afternoon. First afternoon, where Mark Peterson from Chen Milson and Wilkie was talking about, for future ready rooms, how are we building? How are we future proofing? What's the facility look like? And we had a great panel discussion there with Mitch Hershkowitz representing Canon, and Ken Scatura representing Yorktel, and David Albright representing Legrand. And what came out of the conversation, which was actually really interesting, for years and years and years, us technologists, us AV people, had a back seat at the design conversation. Architects would come in and they would build these fancy spaces with beautiful aesthetics and gorgeous lighting, and they'd leave a corner of the room for the technology, and our technology people would come in at the 11 and a half hour and say, I can't work in that corner. And the lights you hung in the middle of the room, they kind of block the view, and none of this works. But it wouldn't really matter because we were the stepchild there. But it looks like, from what everybody has been saying, that conversation has changed. That we've got end users approaching the specialists and the technologists in our space, saying, "We want to talk to you first. We want to build facilities that work, whether they're rebuilding a room or rebuilding a whole floor or a building." We're now getting closer to the front of that conversation, which I think is a remarkably good change that's happening in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw that, I think, echoed at the last session at Poly, and they presented some stats that said if people are going into the office, the first thing that's most important to them is having the right technology. So it's great to hear that, it's not, as you said, it's not the architecture and then, oh, let's try to cram whatever technology fits afterwards. And for me, just overall this whole week, I mean, I focus mainly on the platform and help organizations and the analytics. So, being with such a great collection of, kind of people that are dealing with the more physical, the room setups and more the engineering and the cabling, I found it, I learned a lot and I loved this, getting all these pieces functioning together. Like that's what makes us more productive and more effective, and the spaces really work. So, so it's like the AV and the architecture and the behind the scenes, the platform piece. And if you can get those right, and it's not as easy as we would like, it takes, expertise. But then I think, the office becomes a place where people can do their jobs and thrive, and and that's really, of course, what we all want.
Yeah. No, it was an enlightening and wonderfully upbeat part of the week last week to learn that maybe people are starting, after a 45-year career that I've had, maybe people are starting to take this seriously. So
Right.
so that was a really good thing to happen. So you opened up day 2 for us. We were Crestron arranged for us to be meeting at Microsoft's facilities at Soho. Gorgeous space. Everybody was really impressed with how beautiful it was, and the room that we were in. And you had the difficult and wonderful a responsibility of explaining AI to everybody. Tell us the history of AI while standing on one foot. And you went into some really interesting points, right? I mean, I know that one of the most important things that everybody was really interested in was your comparison chart.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, and I think the chart was, even as I said, it's important to understand, how the different vendors are adding AI to the collaboration platform. So it, looked at, Zoom and Cisco WebEx and Microsoft Copilot and Google Gemini that they're adding to Workspace. But I would say, and I did say, it really is less about the comparison, because you have a platform. And I think that, most organizations, they're not going to, say, hey, I'm going to move from Zoom to WebEx or WebEx to Teams or Teams to, Google, simply because of the AI. So really the focus is, and I tried to make it on leveraging the AI companion or AI assistant or copilot, to the best of your ability and understand the limitations. And so I tried to highlight the differences in terms of the vendors and where the data is going, what models they're using. And of course, week to week, maybe this week, the chart that I presented last week, maybe it's out of date because this is changing quickly. But I think that, understanding the compliancy and the data residency, and then, making sure, and there was a lot of talk about training. I always hold that training is of critical importance. And I think end users really do need to understand the limitations of AI, but also how to generate a prompt that you can, get the most out of AI. And so we had some great, discussions during and after the session as well.
Yeah, the panelists you had, Charmaine and EB and Gary, and we'll show a little clip of them while we're talking. We're actually getting really into that around without arguing with each other. Everybody's being
Right.
very cordial and very agnostic for the whole event for everybody's. But should the AI assistant require training, or should it be smart enough to know what you need automatically? Should Clippy be popping up on the screen and saying, I get what you're doing, let me do it faster? Or
Right.
should we have to train employees that this is there for you? And we got into that huge debate as to whether or not it should be intuitive, which everybody kind of prefers, but if it's intuitive, then we're probably only using, what were the numbers you were talking about, 3%, 5% of the capabilities, and not even knowing about, the other 95% of things that it could be doing without the training, which brought us into a conversation about, well, everybody's workflow is different, and you've got to figure out the best way to fit it into your workflow.
Yeah, and I think this is fascinating because, I think one of the things that I am hopeful around AI is that AI unlocks. Yes, I think somebody said, on average, people use 2% of the capabilities of Excel. And, the hopefulness around AI is perhaps you can just say what you want to do, and then AI is smart enough to know the 100% of AI of Excel functions or all the tools that you have at your disposal, and it just says, yeah, David, I get what you're trying to do. Here's the tools that either you should use, so it surfaces that to you, or hey, ideally, okay, I'm going to go and create that survey you wanted, and I'm going to use Microsoft Forms, and I'm going to send it this way because I know this is the best way, right? So I am hopeful that that's where we get to. That's not where we are now. And I think the real training on AI is just to make sure that your end users understand that it can be phenomenally, wonderful, but it can also get things wrong. And so you do need to double check it, whether it's a meeting summary. And I think people, forget that. And this is where it goes back to and ties in with the rooms. The audio, that the speech to text transcription is only as good as your audio pickup. And so if the audio pickup, like in some of the first days recording, if you try to do a transcription, the transcription is going to have errors. And then AI looks at the transcription, and of course, that's what it's basing it on. So then the errors are propagated forward. And if a human doesn't review that and just sends out, says, here's the notes, here's the notes from the meeting, that's going to cause some problems. So I think we need to train the end users to understand, both the opportunity and the challenges associated with AI, at least where we are today.
Yeah, we may be creating less and editing more in an AI-based future, but I'm not 100% sure if that means it's going to be less work or more work, and I don't think anybody knows. And we also brought up the litigation possibility of,
Yes.
of training that took place. So I've always been the last year been advising caution that people absolutely need to understand what's going on in the world of AI and AI assistants, and should be trying them and experimenting and learning. But I wouldn't be relying on them yet, because I think it's a questionable. We don't know where any of this is going. And as you pointed out, the best piece, and I'll play this clip because it was funny, that it is changing daily, even asking Copilot how many Copilots there are. That was one that was not a very clear answer, that it didn't know. And I love how you phrase this. Let me share with everybody.
I don't know, where Zoom says, and they focus on simplicity. And if you look at whatever option Zoom provides, whether it's on messages or, they focus on, let's provide a few options. Microsoft says more is more. If we can make 3 ways to do the same thing, we'll do that. So if there's a big organization with a lot of different development teams, there are a lot of Microsoft Copilots. So the $30 per user per month is specifically Copilot for Microsoft 365. I would say that's the primary Copilot that gets surfaced inside your Microsoft Office suite. But there are many different Copilots, and some of these have different license prices. I'll just quickly go through a few just so you understand. I asked Copilot how many Copilots there were, and it said there was 7, and then I was feeling pretty smug because I said, I know of 8. But then I sent this to my colleague, and he said, well, you actually forgot Copilot for Security, which is another Copilot, but it's available right now in an early access program, invite only. So I don't know, maybe I kind of got it right.
So now that it's a week later, how many Copilots do you think there are?
Well, even when I put that slide together, I was feeling very, and I said, I feel very smug because Copilot said there's 7. I said, I'm smarter than you, Copilot. I said there's 8. But then I sent it to my colleague, and he said, you missed one, Copilot for security. So I think nobody knows how to count them because I tried to count where there were separate licenses. And that was one of the things that I highlighted in the chart. You know, you got Zoom with the AI companion that's saying anybody with a paid license, we're going to light this stuff up for free, which I think makes it easier for organizations to turn it on because there's not a financial, which is both good and bad. Because I think, you know, back to the thing, make sure your end users understand the data residency, you know, before you turn it on. You know, on the other hand, with the Microsoft at $30 per user per month, that's why I say 2024 is probably a year of experimenting, because if you have 10,000 people, I'm pretty sure you didn't budget $30 per user per month times 10,000, you know, in 2024. So, you know, now you can get it for a handful of people, experiment, figure out the use cases, because everything, you know, and you made this earlier, this point earlier in the segment, that everything is specific to organizations. So figure out if AI is helping or hurting, and then figure out who needs it and who could benefit from it. Do that in 2024. So 2025, you can make sure you're leveraging it, because it will give you, properly applied AI will give you a sustainable competitive advantage. So you can't ignore it.
And you pointed out, and then Rich Hassan of Crestron pointed out in his presentation, this idea of hiding in plain sight.
Right.
It was interesting because you had this slide up of a cat hiding, which I said I didn't understand because your slides are always of your dog Kai, so I didn't understand why you picked a cat there. But you know, the idea that the other pieces of AI, the machine learning, the noise reduction, the cameras that are auto focusing. When was the last time? I keep it back here so I can grab it and show it. When was the last time we picked up a remote control to adjust a camera in a conference room? You know, all this stuff is happening automatically for us now. That's been AI hiding in plain sight all along. So the only new piece is really this large language model / assistant capability, which, you know, I've been a big skeptic of it being worth $30 a user a month. But, you know, if I could get Excel to make the pie chart that I want it to make without me spending 3 hours, I'd be paying $30 a minute, you know, so you never know where any of this is going to go.
Microsoft, don't listen to David.
Don't listen to me, right? Yeah,
Do not up the prices. Yes,
I'm still using Office 2016 because I refuse to go to the cloud, but that's another. And yeah, you want me to pay every day for a license that I could buy once and use? Come on. Anyway, the next session was, what was it, Mr. Megorium's Wonderful Emporium, right? You know, that was the
it was amazing. Like this gateway space was. It reminds me of the box of random cables that I have in my basement, except all these were the greatest, newest, latest prototype. So it was a fantastic space. So like none other space that I've seen.
Yeah, Greg Harper, who's been doing this as long as I have. He was with the NYSSA when I was with Financial News Network, and if you look those two names up, that'll date both of us. But anyway, he has a lot of really nice toys up in this space, and he was showing us some of the latest things that he saw at CES and at ISE, and he had some of the devices there in his room, new ways of connecting technology, new ways of showing technology. He took the slide presentation, which, you know, was very carefully curated to make sure that it was agnostic across all of the sites. You're welcome. And he had it on a second screen that he developed into a 3D motion that it did it automatically, and he put it into virtual spaces. He had the new D10 bar that was up there. That was one of our sponsors. He had the new Kandau Center of Table Device. Had some really cool technology up there. And after presenting, we had a great panel discussion from, I got to get the names right, from Manish Parmar of Amicus Therapeutics, and Aaron Udler of Office Pro, and Jordan Owens of PEXIP, and talking about, you know, how do you incorporate new technology into an existing facility? Do you train people? Do you see if it works and then maybe pull it back because it didn't? At what point do you determine that it's a fad or that it's not a fad and you should deploy that new technology? Really good conversation to have. And the consensus amongst all of them is we don't provide enough training.
Yes, which I think, and I referenced the BC strategy study that Blair Pleasant and I did now a couple of years ago now, but yes. And then users will say they didn't get enough initial training, they don't get enough ongoing training. And certainly Aaron from Office Pro, who is in the training business, is an advocate of training. But then we had a very good discussion about, okay, even if you want to train people, how do you do that effectively, right? So is that, and I think we ended up on saying, there is no right answer. So some people want on demand because they will use it. Some people say they want on demand because they'll ignore it. Still the lunch and learn and get people in a room. There was a lot of discussion about the questions that are surfaced when you're in a live session are going to be very helpful. And so I think, training, I think we ended up at training is critically important, and you need to try it in many different ways and figure out what works inside your organization.
And the cynical comment about it is that every end user on the planet doesn't want to be bothered with training. They just want it to work. But
Right.
everybody's got a different definition of what work means. So that's never going to be equal amongst anybody. But they all think it is. They all go into a room and say, why can't this just work? And everybody says, yeah, why can't it just work? And if you ask them what that meant, they would all have a different definition for what working is. So it is definitely unique to organizations. It's unique to individuals. And what I found over the years is the answer is yes. You have to provide everything. Lunch and learns, hand over hand, on demand, make appointments. The training has to be done in a way that everybody can understand and can capture whenever they need to do it. I'm the guy that when I need to replace a part in my car, I just look it up on YouTube and play the video, and then I know how to do the work. And I might do it badly, but at least I can get it done. So everybody learns differently, but we do need to make that training available.
Yeah, and I think this is another place where I'm super hopeful, optimistic around AI, because whether it's in, I think you could decide that, and I think you were arguing, like, if you walk into a room and you've got a tablet or you've got your phone, maybe the room scrapes your phone and knows you got a meeting. Well, I think that is awesome. I think that, if 5 people walk into the room and you all have phones, and, now it becomes a little challenging. I think this is where, in my future vision, I'm going to say, here's my crystal ball. 5 years from now, walk in a room and you just have a conversation with the room in terms of what you're trying to do. You say, hey room, start my meeting. I have a remote attendee and they want to join. They want to share some information. And this is where I think, AI and that natural language interface, you can unlock all of the capabilities. So all of the wonderful lighting, and I still find, I know everybody tries to make it easy and put buttons and but to move curtains or do different lighting things, I think it'd be far easier if you just could talk to the room and say, this is what I'm trying to do. So 5 years from now, we'll play this back and see if I'm right.
Well, I've predicted voice first in a lot of places and was shot down, and it hasn't moved as quickly as possible. It's interesting, and this is a completely tangential subject. We'll waste time on, but the voice first AI assistants, the AI was so terrible
Right.
that you'd say it like 19 times and get so frustrated you'd throw it against the wall and do it yourself. It's interesting that AI has popped up in our society in places other than the voice first assistants. It kind of got them left behind. So we'll have to see where that goes. And then we had our last day that was hosted by Polly, and presentations were from the team at Pace University, who are one of the few organizations focusing on bringing up the today's youth into the abilities to deal with AV and collaboration and video and provide training. There are so few organizations doing it. They went over their program and who they're associated with, and everybody in the room was really interested in how do we work with them, how do we mentor, how do we reverse mentor, how do we teach. I think it's really great on their part to have actually been able to stand up and say, look, we're taking the bull by the horns here and actually bringing the next generation of people into the workforce in these technology roles.
Yeah, it was a fantastic presentation, like their whole experiential learning, and now they have this, minor in Navy. They brought Cece, one of the interns, who was, just so passionate, and you could just see, she just loved the program. It made me want to enroll. Like the way, they're explaining their experiential exams and, working in groups with equipment, and it just sounded like a very valuable and interesting program. And I think, that is hopefully the future of education. So it was, I think you said the segment is focused on the people, and this really was a great discussion. As you said, tons of engagement from the audience and the attendees. And yeah, great. I was super fascinated to hear about that.
Yeah, it was very impressive. I appreciated them taking the time, and I'm glad we were able to focus on it because it drew back to Gary Sarantino's comment for the first day, which he said the most important part about AI in enterprise is going to be the humans. Is going to be the creativity and the judgment and the editing and all the rest of that. So it was a really nice throwback, and it was really good for everybody. After that, we had Ted Thompson of Poly present a little bit of how Poly sees the hybrid world. A lot of it was reviews. Some of it was some of the gear that they were working with, which was really nice. And then we had our lock note discussion, which kind of covered everything that we've talked about for our UC Weekly News segment today. The 2 points that it didn't that we haven't covered that I think came out of there, which I think were really interesting and really important. One, Ann Aaron brought up the point that it was really nice to now finally have people understand what we do for a living. One of the upsides of the horrific pandemic is that that stuff you do so that you could work remotely or talk to your relatives or take part in your religious ceremonies and everything else. We do that. That's what we've been doing for 20 years, or more than that. So that was a good thing to come with. And then the last point, or at least the last point I have, I'm more than open if you had another one that came because you were on that panel. It was interesting that everybody really loved coming together during the week for the white spaces, for the networking, for the shaking hands, for understanding. And it brought out some of the points that were underlying all the presentations at all the facilities. The idea is we love the ability to work remotely when it's appropriate, to work autonomously and flexibly when it's appropriate. But we also, as human beings, love the ability to come together. And there is no one answer for all of those. No one is going to work 100% remotely. No one should be working 100% in the office from a flexible, work standpoint as opposed to frontline workers. The idea is coming together with purpose. We spent 3 days in New York City at 5 different spaces, coming together for a reason that everybody made time out of their day to be together, to network, to smile, to pat on the back, to share coffee, to share some wine when we did the cocktail party on Tuesday night. And the value is in all of it, is if you're going to be working with remote organizations, make sure you schedule a monthly or a quarterly or a whatever get together so people can be human beings with each other. And when you're doing an event like this, we recorded it. We couldn't do it live, and that's totally on me because we brought it together in 3 weeks as opposed to our usual 3 months. But we should be doing a remote segment so that other people can participate remotely, and we will be sharing this content across the IMCCA and other channels. So it's a blend. We're human beings, and we love coming together.
Yeah, no, I think very well said. And I think that, we talked about the in-person as anchor points, either to build trust, to build awareness, being in the different venues, as I said at the beginning of the segment, it spurs different, points of view, different thought patterns. I think that's what people hope that some virtual reality might unlock as well, as if you can, but clearly in person, that's what happens. And yeah, and then in the Poly offices, just afterwards, there was an opportunity to kind of tour some of the and touch and feel and try some of the newer tech, which I appreciated, because it's one thing to see a canned demo, and it's another thing to see some of the director AI stuff and the acoustic fencing, just to kind of put it through its paces, because I like to kick the tires, and it always works, of course, perfectly in the video demo, and it works really well in real life. But there are, like all things, there's limitations to the technology. So it's nice to be able to see how cool it is, and also better understand. Oh, okay, I better plan for this, right? So yeah, no, but it was. I mean, hats off to you for all the logistics of just being in 5 different places. I know in the morning you would every session you had to get there early just to make sure that things were set up. And so I imagine last week was certainly energizing, but I'm sure it was tiring as well.
Yeah, no, I got home in the middle of the second day and took a nap after, like 600 to-dos that I had to get through at one point. You were flying home and I was flying my pillow there for a couple of hours. It was an exhausting week, but well worth it. It's the kind of things that I've been doing with the IMCCA for close to 20 years now. And the idea, I really believe firmly that all boats rise with the tide. It was so nice to have, more than a dozen sponsors of this event that believe the same way, that were, giving of their spaces or giving of their money to allow something like this to happen. And it's a very inexpensive show compared to some of the other conferences that take place, because we don't spend any money on the facilities. They're provided by the venues in the city. So it just works out really well. And I'm really glad you were able to participate this year. Hopefully you'll participate again when we do them again. We used to do them 2 or 3 times a year. This is the first time we've done it since February of 2020. So that was one of the slides that we had up. We all met in February and then the world shut down. So, it's kind of nice, even though we've been going to trade shows for a year now, it's kind of nice to sort of reopen this bracket on the world and have everything come back up. So thanks for coming. Thanks for joining. Thanks for chatting about it with me today.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure to participate last week. And yeah, and it's exciting just even to recap it. I'm just fondly remembering. So yeah, hats off to you and the IMCCA. And I would love to participate when you do it again next year.
We will do it again. So the next time you and I likely will see each other, unless something weird happens, will be at Enterprise Connect, which is at the end of March. And our guest on UC Weekly News next week will be Eric Krapp, the general manager of Enterprise Connect, and he's going to give us a preview. He's got a couple of little different things working the show this year. He's trying some new things, which I think is the sign of a great conference. It's like, all right, we have what works, we know what works, but now we're also going to try and put some, salt and pepper and spices and see, if we like it, great. If we don't, we won't do it again, and that'll be great. So I'm looking forward to having him talking about that on the show this week. So before we close this week, Kevin, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you to either get some of your expertise or just chat with you about things, how would they go about doing that?
Well, as always, they can look Kevin Kieller up on LinkedIn. But if you're going to go to Enterprise Connect, I'm delivering a session on Monday on Teams and Copilot, which is hopefully, I think it's going to be well attended. And then on Wednesday, Brent Kelly and I are going to effectively look at all the AI across all the other platforms. So I would love to meet up either on LinkedIn digitally, but certainly love to meet up in person at Enterprise Connect.
That'll be great. And I'm going to count that your Monday session, it'd be like about a month and a half from now. You'll tell us how many co-pilots there are then compared to what there were now, and see if the number has changed. So
I will count for you, David.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining us, Kevin. And thank you for joining us as you do every week on UC Weekly News. I'm David Danto. You know how to reach me anytime. It's always a pleasure to chat with everybody that reaches out. You can just Google David J. Danto. I'm the only one. And until next week when we chat with Eric, thanks very much for joining us. And we'll see you next week.